The scorching summer sun beat down mercilessly on the makeshift auction block in Redemption Creek, Texas, as 24-year-old Abigail Nelson stood with her wrists bound, trying desperately to maintain her dignity while men shouted bids for her as if she were cattle. Her once fine blue dress was covered in dust from the long journey, her auburn hair falling in tangled waves around her shoulders as she blinked back tears of humiliation. Just when the highest bid seemed settled and her fate sealed, a tall figure pushed through the crowd, his spurs jingling with each purposeful step. "This ain't right," came a deep voice, silencing the crowd as the stranger placed his worn leather hat atop her head, shielding her eyes from the brutal sun. "I'll take her home." Owen Blackett hadn't planned on attending the auction that day in 1875, let alone stepping in to save a woman he'd never met. His ranch 10 miles outside of town required constant attention, and the summer cattle drive was just weeks away. But something about the dignified way she held herself amid such degradation had stirred something in him he couldn't ignore. $500, the auctioneer repeated incredulously. "Mr. Blackett, surely you don't mean to pay such a sum for this woman. She's skinny as a rail and doesn't look built for ranch work." Owen reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a leather pouch. "I said 500, count it if you like." His blue eyes never left Abigail's face as he counted out the money. The crowd murmured in disbelief. $500 was a small fortune enough to buy a decent parcel of land. Abigail stared at him through the shadow cast by his hat. Was this mercy or merely a different kind of ownership? She couldn't tell, but anything seemed better than being sold to Silas Thornton, the saloon owner whose final bid Owen had doubled. "She's yours then," the auctioneer declared, pocketing the money, "though I can't imagine what you're thinking, Blackett." Owen stepped forward and gently took Abigail's arm. "Can you ride?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she whispered, her voice hoarse from thirst and fear. "Good." He led her to where his chestnut stallion was hitched. With surprising gentleness for such a weathered man, he untied her wrists, his fingers lingering momentarily on the raw skin. "Why are you doing this?" Abigail asked, her green eyes searching his face for any sign of malice. "Questions later," he replied, lifting her onto his horse before mounting behind her. "Let's get away from here first." As they rode away from town, Abigail felt the stares of the crowd burning into her back. She clutched the brim of Owen's hat, holding it in place as the horse picked up speed. "I'm Owen Blackett," he said after they'd put some distance between themselves and town. "I have a ranch about 2 hours' ride from here." "Abigail Nelson," she replied softly. I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "You don't know what you're getting into." They rode in silence for a while, the vastness of the Texas landscape stretching around them. Miles of scrubby brush and occasional mesquite trees dotted the rolling hills. The summer heat was oppressive, but the movement of the horse created a slight breeze that offered minimal relief. "How did you come to be on that auction block?" Owen finally asked. Abigail stiffened. "My father died 6 months ago. He had debts I didn't know about. When the creditors came, they took everything, including me, said I could work off what he owed." Her voice was flat, drained of emotion. "They shipped me west with others in similar situations. I've been traveling for weeks." Owen's jaw tightened. "That's not legal." "Much happens that isn't legal out here, Mr. Blackett. I've learned that quickly enough." "Owen," he corrected. "And you're right about that." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the landscape changed. They crossed a small creek and the vegetation grew more abundant. Eventually, a modest but well-maintained ranch house came into view, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn. Cattle grazed in the distance and smoke rose from the chimney of the main house. "This is Willowbrook Ranch," Owen said. "It's not much, but it's mine." As they approached, a stout woman with gray-streaked hair emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Behind her, a young boy of about 12 peered curiously at the newcomers. "Mrs. Hadley," Owen called out as he dismounted and then helped Abigail down. "We have a guest." The woman's eyebrows rose as she took in Abigail's disheveled appearance and the hat still perched on her head. "This is Miss Abigail Nelson," Owen continued. "She'll be staying with us for a while." "I see," Mrs. Hadley said, though it was clear she didn't see it all. "Well, come in then, Miss Nelson. You look like you could use a bath and a hot meal." "Thank you," Abigail said, removing Owen's hat and holding it out to him. "And thank you, Mr. Owen." He took the hat, their fingers brushing briefly. "Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Mrs. Hadley ushered Abigail inside while the boy took charge of Owen's horse. The ranch house was simple but comfortable, with solid wooden furniture and colorful quilts that added warmth to the rooms. "Baths through there," Mrs. Hadley said, pointing to a door off the kitchen. "I'll heat some water. There's a dress of mine you can borrow. It'll be big, but it's clean." "You're very kind," Abigail said, feeling overwhelmed by the woman's matter-of-fact hospitality. "Not kind," Mrs. Hadley corrected. "Just decent, something lacking in these parts lately." She paused, studying Abigail's face. "Owen's a good man, best I've worked for. Whatever brought you here, you're safe now." An hour later, clean and dressed in Mrs. Hadley's faded blue dress cinched tight at the waist with a piece of rope, Abigail sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of stew in front of her. Owen entered, freshly washed himself, his dark hair damp and his face clean-shaven. "Better?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. "Much, thank you." She took a spoonful of stew, savoring the rich flavor. "This is delicious. Mrs. Hadley's a fine cook, one of the reasons I keep her around." He smiled slightly, and Abigail noticed how it softened his weathered features. "The boy?" She inquired. "Timothy, her grandson. Parents died of fever 2 years back. They live in the small cabin behind the house." Owen served himself some stew. "So, Miss Nelson, we need to discuss your situation." Abigail set down her spoon. "What do you expect of me?" she asked directly. Owen looked startled. "Expect? You paid $500 for me. Surely you want something in return." His expression darkened. "I didn't pay for you, Miss Nelson. I paid to free you. There's a difference." "Then what am I doing here, recovering?" "Then you can decide what you want to do next." He took a bite of stew. "Can you cook?" "Yes, so, reasonably well. Read and write." "My father was a school teacher before things changed." Owen nodded. "Good, Mrs. Hadley could use help around the house. And I've been meaning to organize the accounts. I'll pay you fair wages for honest work until you decide where you want to go." Abigail stared at him in disbelief. "You mean I'm free to leave?" "Of course, though I'd advise waiting until you have some money saved and somewhere specific to go." "Texas isn't kind to women traveling alone." A lump formed in Abigail's throat. After months of being treated like property, his simple acknowledgement of her autonomy was overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me for treating you like a human being," he said gruffly. "That should be expected, not praised." They finished their meal in companionable silence. Afterward, Mrs. Hadley showed Abigail to a small but clean bedroom at the back of the house. "Rest now," the older woman said. "Things will look clearer in the morning." Alone for the first time in months, Abigail sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself to cry, not from fear or sorrow this time, but from relief. Whatever tomorrow brought, tonight she was safe. Dawn came early on the ranch. Abigail woke to the sounds of activity horses nickering, men calling to each other, the clatter of cookware from the kitchen. She dressed quickly in Mrs. Hadley's borrowed clothing and made her way to the kitchen, where the housekeeper was preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Abigail said. "May I help?" Mrs. Hadley looked up from the stove. "Certainly, you can fry that bacon while I finish these biscuits. The men will be in shortly, hungry as wolves." "Men, ranch hands, 4 of them plus Owen and Timothy, though the boy only thinks he's a man." Mrs. Hadley smiled fondly. "They work hard, feed them well, and they work harder." Abigail took over the bacon, grateful for the familiar task. "Have you been with Mr. Blackett long?" 3 years. Came here after my daughter and son-in-law passed. Owen needed a housekeeper, and Timothy and I needed a home." She slid a tray of biscuits into the oven. "He's fair and honest, rare qualities these days." Before Abigail could respond, the door opened, and Owen entered with 4 men following behind. They removed their hats as they crossed the threshold, nodding respectfully to the women. "Miss Nelson, these are my hands," Owen said. "Frank, Hector, Ned, and Daniel." The men murmured greetings, clearly curious about her presence but too polite to ask questions. They sat at the large table as Mrs. Hadley and Abigail served breakfast. Miss Nelson will be helping around the house, Owen explained as he buttered a biscuit. She's a guest here, and I expect you to treat her as such. Yes, sir, the men replied almost in unison. Breakfast proceeded with the men discussing the day's work mending fences, checking the herd, breaking new horses. Abigail listened, finding comfort in the ordinary conversation after months of uncertainty. After the men departed, Abigail helped Mrs. Hadley clean up. What can I do today? She asked. The mending pile is threatening to topple over, Mrs. Hadley said, pointing to a basket overflowing with clothing. And if you truly can read and write, Owen has account books that haven't been properly kept since I've been here. Abigail spent the morning with needle and thread, repairing shirts and trousers while Mrs. Hadley kneaded dough for bread. The rhythmic work was soothing, allowing her mind to settle for the first time in months. Were you married back home? Mrs. Hadley asked casually as she shaped loaves. No, Abigail replied. There was someone once, but he left for California when gold was discovered. Never heard from him again. Probably for the best. Men who chase gold rarely find it and even more rarely keep it. Mrs. Hadley brushed flour from her hands. And Owen. Has he spoken of why he's alone? Abigail shook her head. We haven't discussed personal matters. Mrs. Hadley covered the bread dough with a cloth. He was married once years ago. She died in childbirth along with the baby. That was before he came to Texas, started fresh here. How terrible, Abigail murmured, thinking of the pain he must have endured. Yes, made him cautious with his heart, but a good man nonetheless. Mrs. Hadley gave her a pointed look. Just so you know, the days fell into a pattern. Abigail helped Mrs. Hadley with household tasks and began organizing Owen's account books, which were indeed in a state of disarray. She discovered she had a talent for numbers and record-keeping, and soon created a system that clearly tracked the ranch's expenses and income. Owen noticed. A week after her arrival, he found her at the desk in the small study, bent over the ledgers. Mrs. Hadley says you've worked miracles with these books, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Abigail looked up, a pencil tucked behind her ear. Hardly miracles, just organization. More than I managed. He entered the room and peered over her shoulder at the neat columns of figures. You have beautiful handwriting. My father insisted on it, said a person's penmanship reflects their character. And what does mine reflect? Owen asked, amusement in his voice as he pointed to his own scrawled entries. That you're a busy man with more important things to do than balance ledgers, she replied diplomatically. He laughed, a rich sound that Abigail realized she hadn't heard before. Kindly put. The truth is, I've never had much patience for paperwork. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them, an acknowledgement, perhaps, that they were beginning to know each other. I've been meaning to ask, Owen said, breaking the moment. Do you ride? I used to back home in Missouri. It's been some time, though. Would you like to see more of the ranch? I could saddle a gentle mare for you. The idea of leaving the house, of feeling the wind in her hair and the sun on her face was suddenly appealing. I'd like that very much. An hour later, they rode side by side across the rolling landscape of Willowbrook Ranch. Owen had provided her with a proper riding skirt that had belonged to Mrs. Hadley in younger days, and Abigail felt almost like herself again, seated comfortably on a dappled gray mare named Daisy. This is beautiful country, she said as they crested a hill that offered a view of the entire property. Cattle grazed in the valley below, and a creek wound its way through stands of cottonwood trees. It is, Owen agreed. Took me 5 years to build it to what it is now. Started with just 50 acres and 30 head of cattle. And now, 500 acres, 300 head and growing. There was pride in his voice. Another good year or two and I can expand again. You've accomplished a great deal on your own, he glanced at her. Not entirely on my own. Good hands make all the difference. And now, with you setting the book straight, I have a clearer picture of where we stand. I'm glad to be useful, she said sincerely. They rode in companionable silence for a while, following the creek upstream. Eventually, they came to a small clearing where a massive oak tree provided shade. Owen dismounted and helped Abigail down, his hands lingering briefly at her waist. "This is my thinking spot," he said, leading her to the base of the tree where a natural depression in the trunk formed a sort of seat. "When decisions need making, I come here." "It's peaceful," Abigail observed, settling beside him. The babbling creek and rustling leaves created a soothing backdrop. "Miss Nelson, Abigail," Owen began, his tone more serious. "It's been a week. Have you given thought to what you want to do?" The question caught her off guard, though she knew it shouldn't have. Of course he would expect her to move on eventually. I haven't made definite plans," she admitted. "I have an aunt in St. Louis who might take me in, but the journey would be costly and difficult." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need." "Your work with the accounts alone is worth your keep." Relief washed over her. "Thank you, I'd like to stay at least for now. I feel safe here." His expression softened. "Good, that's good." A comfortable silence fell between them. Abigail found herself studying Owen's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. She quickly looked away when he turned toward her. "We should head back," he said, rising and offering his hand. "Mrs. Hadley will have dinner ready soon." As they rode back to the ranch house, Abigail realized that for the first time since her father's death, she wasn't consumed by fear for the future. There was something about Willowbrook Ranch and its owner that made her feel that perhaps, just perhaps, she could build a new life here. The weeks passed, and summer gave way to early autumn. Abigail's place at Willowbrook Ranch solidified as she took on more responsibilities. Beyond keeping the accounts, she helped Mrs. Hadley with cooking and cleaning, taught Timothy reading and arithmetic in the evenings, and even learned to garden, tending to the vegetable patch behind the house. Owen observed these changes with quiet approval. He found himself seeking her company more often, asking her opinion on ranch matters, and lingering at the dinner table to hear her stories of life in Missouri. Sometimes in the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset while she read aloud from one of the few books in the house, mostly practical guides to ranching, but also a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that had belonged to Owen's mother. One evening in late September, Owen returned from town with supplies and a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, handing it to Abigail as she greeted him in the yard. Surprised, she carefully unwrapped it to find a leather-bound journal and a fountain pen. "Owen, they're beautiful," she gasped, running her fingers over the smooth cover. "I noticed you writing on scraps of paper sometimes," he explained, suddenly self-conscious. "Thought you might like something proper to write in." "It's the nicest gift I've received in years," she said softly. "Thank you." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings growing beyond friendship or employer and employee. Owen cleared his throat and looked away first. "There's a harvest dance in town next Saturday," he said casually, too casually. "The whole ranch usually goes. Good for morale." "That sounds lovely," Abigail replied, her heart beating a little faster. "Would you like to attend? With me, I mean." The words came out in a rush, so unlike Owen's usual measured speech, a slow smile spread across Abigail's face. "Yes, I would like that very much." The week leading up to the dance was filled with preparation. Mrs. Hadley altered one of her better dresses for Abigail, a deep blue calico that brought out the green in her eyes. She even unearthed a pair of small pearl earrings that had belonged to her daughter. "You'll be the prettiest girl there," Mrs. Hadley declared as she helped Abigail dress on Saturday evening, "and riding in with the most eligible bachelor in the county, Mrs. Hadley." Abigail protested, though she couldn't hide her blush. "It's just a dance." "MMHMM," the older woman hummed knowingly. "And I'm just an old woman who doesn't recognize the look of a man smitten." Before Abigail could respond, there was a knock at the door. Owen stood there in his Sunday best, a dark coat over a crisp white shirt, his normally unruly hair neatly combed. "Miss Nelson," he said formally, though his eyes conveyed more intimate appreciation. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied softly. "You look quite handsome yourself." The ride to town was filled with anticipation. They traveled in the wagon with Mrs. Hadley, Timothy, and two of the ranch hands, but Abigail was acutely aware of Owen beside her, his arm occasionally brushing hers as the wagon jolted over rough patches in the road. Redemption Creek looked different at night, transformed by lanterns and bunting strung across the main street. The town hall, normally used for meetings and court proceedings, had been cleared for dancing, with musicians setting up on a small stage. As they entered, Abigail felt eyes turn toward them. She realized with a start that this was her first public appearance since the auction. Would people remember? Would they whisper behind their hands about the woman Owen Blackett had bought? As if sensing her discomfort, Owen placed a reassuring hand at the small of her back. "Ignore them," he murmured. "You belong here as much as anyone." The music started, a lively fiddle tune that soon had couples taking to the floor. Owen turned to Abigail with a slight bow. "May I have this dance?" She placed her hand in his, and he led her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was strong and sure as they moved through the steps of the dance. Despite the years since she'd last danced, Abigail found the rhythm easily, especially with such a capable partner. "You dance well," she commented as they circled each other. "My mother insisted all her sons learn," he replied with a smile, said no Blackett would embarrass her at social gatherings. "She sounds formidable." She was. You would have liked her. The simple statement, implying that in another world, another time she might have been part of his family, sent a warm flutter through Abigail's chest. They danced several more dances before stepping outside for some air. The night was cool, stars brilliant in the clear sky above. Owen led her to a bench beneath an oak tree slightly removed from the crowds. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked. "Very much," she replied honestly. "It's been so long since I've done something like this, something normal." "Abigail," Owen began, his voice serious. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you." Before he could continue, a harsh voice interrupted them. "Well, if it isn't Blackett and his purchased woman." They turned to see Silas Thornton, the saloon owner who had bid against Owen at the auction. He stood swaying slightly, clearly having imbibed generously from his own establishment. Owen stood immediately, positioning himself between Thornton and Abigail. "Move along, Thornton, you're drunk." "Just making conversation," Thornton slurred, "wondering if you got your money's worth." $500 is a lot for damaged goods. Abigail flinched at the crude implication. Owen's posture stiffened, his hands clenching into fists. "Apologize to the lady," Owen demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. "Lady," Thornton laughed. "She was on the auction block." He never finished the sentence. Owen's fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling onto the dirt. There was a moment of shocked silence before Thornton struggled to his feet, blood trickling from his split lip. "You'll regret that, Blackett," he spat. "Not as much as you'll regret the next word out of your mouth if it's disrespectful," Owen replied evenly. "Now go sleep it off before I forget my manners entirely." Thornton glared at them both before staggering away, muttering curses. Owen turned to Abigail, concern etched on his features. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though she felt shaken. "Yes, thank you. I'm sorry about that. Thornton's had it in for me since I outbid him on that parcel of land south of the creek last year." He sat beside her again, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "But that's no excuse for how he spoke to you." "It's not your fault," Abigail said quietly. "And what he said, well, there's some truth in it. I was on that auction block. Because you were wronged, not because of anything you did," Owen said firmly. "And you are a lady, Abigail Nelson. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." His conviction brought tears to her eyes. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hand over his. "Thank you, Owen, not just for tonight, but for everything, for saving me that day, for giving me a place at Willowbrook." He turned his hand over, entwining his fingers with hers. "Having you at Willowbrook it's made the ranch feel like a home again." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "What I was trying to say before we were interrupted. Abigail, I care for you, more than I expected to. More than might be proper given the circumstances of how we met." Her heart pounded in her chest. "I care for you too," she admitted. "I've tried not to. I know my situation is complicated, that people might talk." "Let them talk," he said fervently. "I don't give a damn what anyone thinks except you." In the soft glow of the distant lanterns, with the music floating through the night air, Owen leaned forward. Abigail met him halfway, their lips meeting in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened with shared emotion. His hand cupped her cheek. thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want to rush you," he murmured. "If you need time." "I've had time," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotions coursing through her. "3 months of seeing what kind of man you are, Owen Blackett. I know my own mind and heart." He smiled, that rare, transformative smile that changed his entire face. "Then may I court you properly, Miss Nelson, with the understanding that my intentions are honorable and permanent." "You may," she answered, returning his smile. "Though I think we're past the point of Miss Nelson, don't you?" "Abigail," he said, her name like a caress on his lips. "My Abigail." They returned to the dance hand in hand, both aware that a significant threshold had been crossed. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of music, laughter, and shared glances that spoke volumes. When they finally headed home, the wagon quieter now with Timothy asleep against Mrs. Hadley's shoulder, Owen kept Abigail's hand in his, a silent promise of what was to come. Life at Willowbrook Ranch took on a new dimension as autumn deepened. Owen and Abigail's courtship was conducted in the open, with no pretense of hiding their growing feelings. They rode together in the afternoons when his work allowed, took walks along the creek in the evenings, and sometimes simply sat side by side on the porch, talking or reading in comfortable silence. The ranch hands accepted the development with knowing smiles, and Mrs. Hadley's approval was evident in her increased efforts to give the couple moments of privacy. Only Timothy seemed confused by the change. "Are you going to marry Mr. Blackett?" He asked Abigail bluntly one morning as she helped him with his arithmetic. Caught off guard, Abigail felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That's a very direct question, Timothy." "Grandma says you are. She says the ranch needs a mistress and Mr. Blackett needs a wife. Does she now?" Abigail tried to sound stern but couldn't help smiling. "Well, if Mr. Blackett asks me, I'll consider it, but for now let's focus on these multiplication tables." The truth was, marriage had been on her mind. Owen hadn't formally proposed, but his intentions were clear in 100 small ways. The way he included her in decisions about the ranch, his talk of future plans that always seemed to include her, the tender kisses they shared when alone. One crisp October morning, a letter arrived from St. Louis. Abigail recognized her aunt's handwriting immediately and opened it with trembling fingers. She had written to her aunt weeks ago, explaining her situation and current circumstances. Owen found her on the porch, the letter in her lap, her expression troubled. "Bad news?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Not exactly," she replied, handing him the letter. "My aunt has invited me to come live with her. She's even sent money for the journey." Owen read the letter, his face carefully neutral. When he finished, he returned it to her without comment, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. "I won't go," Abigail said softly. He turned to her then, his gaze intense. "I won't ask you to stay if St. Louis is where you want to be. If you have family there who can provide for you." "Owen," she interrupted, placing her hand on his arm. "My place is here now, if you want me to stay." The relief that washed over his features was answer enough, but he put it into words anyway. "I want you to stay more than anything. But I want it to be your choice, freely made." "It is," she assured him. "My aunt is kind to offer, but she's a stranger to me. This," she gestured to the ranch around them, "this feels like home now. You feel like home." Owen took her hands in his. "I've been waiting for the right moment, but maybe there isn't one better than now." He slid from the bench to one knee before her. "Abigail Nelson, I love you. Will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and overwhelming. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." He rose and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion that had been building between them. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small ring, a delicate gold band with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "I've been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the courage to ask." "It's beautiful," she said, admiring how it caught the morning light, "and perfect." They agreed to a December wedding, giving them time to prepare while avoiding the busiest season on the ranch. The news spread quickly, met with genuine happiness from the ranch hands and unabashed delight from Mrs. Hadley, who immediately began planning the wedding feast. The weeks that followed were busy but joyful. Abigail wrote to her aunt, explaining her decision and inviting her to the wedding, though she knew the distance made attendance unlikely. Owen rode to the county seat to file the necessary paperwork and returned with fabric for a wedding dress, a rich cream brocade that must have cost a small fortune. "Owen, it's too extravagant," Abigail protested when he presented it to her. "Nothing is too good for my bride," he replied firmly. "Besides, it's practical. You can wear it to church after." She laughed at his attempt to justify the expense. "Very practical. I'm sure no one will notice me in cream brocade every Sunday." As the wedding approached, Abigail found herself reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had stood on an auction block, her future bleak and uncertain. Now she was preparing to marry a man she loved deeply, a man who had not only saved her from a terrible fate, but had shown her what true partnership could be. The night before the wedding, after a final fitting of her dress with Mrs. Hadley, Abigail sat in her room, soon to be their room, writing in the journal Owen had given her. She had filled many pages over the months, recording her thoughts, fears, and growing love. Tonight she wrote of gratitude and hope, of endings and beginnings. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Owen standing there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I know it's bad luck to see the bride before the wedding," he said, "but there's something I need to show you." Curious, she followed him outside to where a wagon waited. "Where are we going?" "Not far," he promised, helping her up. "Just over the rise." They rode in comfortable silence for about 10 minutes, following a path that branched off from the main road to the house. As they crested a small hill, Abigail gasped. Below them, nestled among a stand of trees near the creek, stood a small cabin newly built, with smoke rising from the chimney and warm light glowing from the windows. "Owen, what is this?" he smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. "Our home, if you like it. Our home." "But the ranch house will still be there for the business of the ranch," he explained. "But I thought we might want a place that's just ours, somewhere quiet, away from the hands and the constant activity." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes as she took in the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "When did you do this?" "Been working on it since September, whenever I could spare time. The men helped. Even Timothy hauled his share of lumber." He looked suddenly uncertain. "If you don't like it, we can stay at the main house. I just thought." She silenced him with a kiss. "I love it," she whispered against his lips. "It's perfect." Relief and happiness spread across his features. "Want to see inside?" The cabin was small but beautifully crafted, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and a wooden table with 2 chairs. A doorway led to a bedroom where a large bed covered in a colorful quilt dominated the space. Simple curtains hung at the windows, and a bookshelf already held a few volumes, including the Shakespeare sonnets. "Mrs. Hadley helped with the furnishings," Owen explained as Abigail explored, running her fingers over the smooth wooden surfaces. "Said I'd make a mess of it on my own." "It's wonderful," Abigail said, turning to face him. "All of it. I can't believe you did this for us." "For you," he corrected softly. "Everything I do now is for you, Abigail." She went to him then, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. His heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear. "I love you, Owen Blackett, and I love you." He tilted her face up to his. "Tomorrow you'll be my wife." "I already am in every way that matters," she replied. "The ceremony just makes it official." He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and barely restrained desire. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. "We should get back," Owen said reluctantly. "Before I forget my resolve to be a gentleman until tomorrow." Abigail smiled, feeling both innocent and womanly under his admiring gaze. "Yes, we should, but tomorrow night we'll come back here." "Tomorrow night," he confirmed, his voice husky with anticipation. "This will be our home." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with a bright December sun casting long shadows across the ranch. Abigail woke early, too excited to sleep, and watched the sunrise from her window. Today marked not just her marriage to Owen, but the official beginning of her new life, a life chosen freely, built on love and mutual respect. Mrs. Hadley arrived mid-morning to help her prepare, bringing with her a crown of evergreen and dried berries to wear in her hair. Something festive, she explained, since fresh flowers are scarce this time of year. As Abigail bathed and dressed, she thought of her father. Would he approve of Owen? She believed he would. Both men shared the same fundamental decency, the same quiet strength. She wished he could be here to give her away, but in his absence, Mrs. Hadley's husband, who had ridden in from the neighboring ranch where he worked, would do the honor. The dress fit perfectly, the cream brocade complementing her auburn hair and fair skin. Mrs. Hadley fastened the evergreen crown atop her carefully arranged curls and stepped back to admire the effect. Beautiful, the older woman declared, uncharacteristic tears in her eyes. Absolutely beautiful. A light knock at the door announced Timothy, dressed in his Sunday best, his hair slicked down with water. "Mr. Blackett sent me to see if you're ready," he said importantly. "Everyone's waiting at the church." The small church in Redemption Creek was decorated simply but elegantly with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. As the wagon approached, Abigail could see people gathered outside, not just the ranch hands and a few neighbors, but what appeared to be half the town. "I didn't realize we'd invited so many," she said nervously to Mrs. Hadley. "Word spread," the housekeeper replied with a smile. "People are curious about the woman who captured Owen Blackett's heart, and a wedding is always cause for celebration, especially as winter sets in." Mr. Hadley helped Abigail down from the wagon and offered his arm. "Ready, Miss Nelson, for the last time you'll be called that." She took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready." The small crowd parted as they approached, murmurs of appreciation following in their wake. Inside, the church was warm and fragrant with pine. Candles illuminated the simple altar where the preacher waited with Owen beside him. Owen turned as she entered, and the look on his face, wonder, love, joy, nearly took Abigail's breath away. He was handsome in his dark suit, his usually wind-blown hair tamed for the occasion, but it was the emotion in his eyes that made her heart race. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for all their days. When Owen slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were warm and sure. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen's kiss was tender but filled with promise. "Mrs. Blackett," he whispered against her lips, and Abigail felt a thrill at her new name, a name chosen in love, not imposed by circumstance. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch house, with tables set up in the yard despite the December chill. A bonfire roared nearby, providing warmth as guests enjoyed Mrs. Hadley's feast: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and pies of every description. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon dancing commenced, with Owen leading Abigail in the first dance. "Happy?" he asked as they moved together beneath the winter sky. "Completely," she replied, and it was true. The joy she felt seemed too big for her body to contain, spilling out in her smile, in the way she moved, in the light she knew must be shining from her eyes. As the afternoon progressed, Abigail noticed a man standing somewhat apart from the festivities, watching with an unreadable expression. With a start, she recognized Silas Thornton. She tensed slightly, and Owen, ever attuned to her, followed her gaze. "I'll ask him to leave," he said quietly. "No," Abigail decided. "It's a day for new beginnings. Perhaps this can be one as well." Taking Owen's hand, she approached Thornton, who looked uncomfortable but stood his ground. "Mr. Thornton," she greeted him calmly, "thank you for coming to our wedding." The saloon owner cleared his throat. "Mrs. Blackett," he acknowledged, the new title clearly deliberate. "I came to offer congratulations," and he hesitated, glancing at Owen, "to apologize for my behavior at the harvest dance. It was unworthy." Owen's surprise was evident, but he nodded acceptance. "Thank you for that, Thornton. Would you care for some food? There's plenty." A tentative peace was established as Thornton accepted a plate and eventually even joined in conversation with some of the other guests. Abigail squeezed Owen's hand in silent appreciation of his graciousness. As evening fell and the celebration continued, Owen leaned close to his new wife. "Ready to see our home, Mrs. Blackett?" The intimacy in his voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the December air. "Yes," she replied simply. They made their farewells amid good-natured teasing and well wishes. Mrs. Hadley pressed a basket into Abigail's hands. Breakfast for tomorrow, she explained with a knowing smile, and then they were in the wagon, heading toward their cabin. The small house glowed with welcoming light as they approached, smoke curling from the chimney against the darkening sky. Owen had arranged for one of the hands to light the fires and lamps earlier, ensuring the cabin would be warm upon their arrival. At the door, Owen surprised Abigail by lifting her into his arms. "Tradition," he explained as he carried her across the threshold. Inside, the cabin was transformed. Candles illuminated the main room, and a fire crackled in the hearth. Someone, Mrs. Hadley, surely had scattered evergreen sprigs on the table alongside a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Owen set Abigail gently on her feet but kept his arms around her. "Welcome home, wife," he murmured, his voice deep with emotion. "Husband," she replied, savoring the word. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the familiar lines with new wonder. "I never thought I would find you, nor I you." He captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "That day at the auction, I wasn't planning to be there. Something, fate, providence, luck led me there at that exact moment." "I'm grateful it did," Abigail whispered. "So grateful." Their lips met in a kiss that quickly deepened, months of restrained desire finally finding expression. Owen's hands trembled slightly as he helped her remove the evergreen crown from her hair, his fingers lingering in the auburn waves as they tumbled down her back. "You are so beautiful," he said reverently. "From the first moment I saw you, even covered in dust and afraid, your beauty and dignity shone through." Abigail's heart swelled with love for this man who had seen her worth when she was at her lowest. With newfound boldness, she began to unbutton his shirt. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me how much you love me." The night that followed was one of discovery and joy, of tender passion and whispered promises. In Owen's arms, Abigail found not just pleasure but a profound sense of homecoming, as if every hardship in her life had been leading her to this moment, this man, this love. Afterward, lying beside him with her head on his chest and his arm around her shoulders, Abigail felt a peace she had never known. Outside, the winter wind whispered through the trees, but inside their small cabin, all was warmth and contentment. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm happy," she replied honestly. "Truly, deeply happy." He kissed the top of her head. "As am I, more than I ever thought possible after I lost Sarah and the baby. I didn't think I could love again, didn't want to risk that pain." "What changed your mind?" Abigail asked softly. "You did." His arms tightened around her. "Your courage, your kindness, your strength. How could I not fall in love with you?" They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams, planning their future together. They would expand the ranch, perhaps add sheep as well as cattle. They would make improvements to the main house and eventually build a school for the children of ranch hands and neighboring farms. And they would have children of their own, a family born of love and choice. As dawn approached, they finally drifted to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Spring came early to Willowbrook Ranch in 1876. The harsh Texas winter gave way to green grass and wildflowers, and with the new season came news that filled the Blackett household with joy. Abigail was expecting a child. Owen's reaction to the announcement was everything she could have hoped for. His face transformed with wonder, and he lifted her in a careful embrace, spinning her around their cabin before setting her gently on her feet. "A baby," he said in awe, placing his hand over her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Due in late September, according to Mrs. Hadley's calculations," Abigail confirmed, covering his hand with her own. The months that followed were busy ones. The cattle drive took Owen away for 3 weeks in early summer, the longest they had been apart since their marriage, but he returned with profits that exceeded expectations, and immediately set about making improvements to both houses to prepare for the baby's arrival. A proper nursery was added to their cabin, and Owen crafted a cradle from cedar wood, lining it with soft blankets that Abigail and Mrs. Hadley sewed from scraps of fabric collected over the months. As Abigail's body changed with the growing life inside her, Owen's attentiveness only increased. He insisted she rest during the hottest part of the day, brought her wild strawberries from a patch he discovered near the creek, and read to her in the evenings, his deep voice soothing both mother and unborn child. Despite her advancing pregnancy, Abigail maintained her role in managing the ranch accounts and household affairs. If anything, her condition made her more determined to contribute, to prove that she was a true partner in their life together. "You don't have to push yourself," Owen reminded her one evening as she balanced the ledgers despite obvious fatigue. "I know," she replied, smiling up at him, "but I want to. This ranch is ours, our legacy for our child. I want to do my part." He kissed her forehead tenderly. "You already are, by giving us this child, but I understand, just promise to rest when you need to." The baby came early on a stormy night in mid-September. Mrs. Hadley, experienced from helping deliver countless babies over the years, took charge while Owen paced anxiously outside the bedroom door. The labor was long and difficult, but just before dawn, as the storm cleared and the first light broke over the horizon, a lusty cry announced the arrival of Daniel James Blackett, named for Owen's father and Abigail's. When Owen was finally allowed to enter, the sight of Abigail holding their son exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with perspiration and her eyes shining with love, brought him to his knees beside the bed. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, gently touching the tiny fingers that curled reflexively around his own. "And you are miraculous. We made him together," Abigail said softly. "Would you like to hold your son?" The image of Owen cradling their newborn with such tender care, tears streaming unashamedly down his weathered cheeks, was one Abigail knew she would carry in her heart forever. Life adjusted to accommodate their newest family member. Daniel proved to be a good-natured baby, with Owen's dark hair and Abigail's green eyes. He became the center of their world, a physical embodiment of the love they shared. On Daniel's first birthday, as family and friends gathered to celebrate, Abigail found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. From the desperation of the auction block to the joy of motherhood, from the shame of being sold to the pride of helping build a thriving ranch, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. "Penny for your thoughts," Owen said, coming to stand beside her as they watched Timothy entertain Daniel with a wooden horse he had carved himself. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "How lucky we are." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Owen said firmly. "We built this life together, choice by choice, day by day." She turned in his arms to face him. "Do you ever think about that day, the auction?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "Not with regret, never that, but with gratitude. If I hadn't been there at that exact moment." "But you were," Abigail said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "You were there, and you placed your hat on my head, and you led me home. The best decision I ever made," Owen murmured against her lips. Their kiss was interrupted by Daniel's delighted squeal as Timothy's horse galloped across his lap. They turned to watch their son, both smiling at his joy. "I have news," Abigail said after a moment, a hint of mischief in her voice. Owen raised an eyebrow in question. "Mrs. Hadley confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have another baby come spring." The happiness that bloomed on Owen's face was answer enough, but he swept her into his arms anyway, mindful of their audience as he embraced her. "I love you, Abigail Blackett," he whispered fervently. "More each day." "And I love you," she replied, her heart full to bursting with gratitude for this man, this life, this love that had saved her in every way a person could be saved. As the sun began to set on Willowbrook Ranch, casting long golden shadows across the land they had nurtured together, Abigail knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged, not because fate or circumstance had placed her here, but because she had chosen it, just as Owen had chosen her that day beneath the harsh Texas sun. In the years that followed, the Blackett family thrived. Daniel was joined by a sister, Emma, in the spring of 1878, and another brother, Matthew, 2 years later. The ranch expanded, becoming one of the most successful in the county, known for its fair treatment of workers and quality livestock. Owen and Abigail's partnership deepened with each passing year, their love strengthened by shared joys and occasional hardships. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated bountiful years, and watched their children grow strong and capable in the Texas landscape they called home. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Owen would place his hat on Abigail's head, a different hat now, but the gesture unchanged, and they would walk together to the oak tree by the creek, their special place. There they would sit side by side, hands entwined, and marvel at the life they had built from that single pivotal moment when a cowboy's compassion and a woman's courage had set them on a path neither could have foreseen. And in those quiet moments, with the creek murmuring beside them and the vast Texas sky overhead, they knew that their story, begun in desperation but flourishing in love, was still being written day by day, choice by choice, together.